Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about some bias that can come up with certain sampling methods. Bias is where the data is influenced in some way, such that it won't actually represent what's happening in the population. Maybe you get too many positive results or negative results that are skewed by something else that's going on within the survey itself. So the first method that we want to look at is this voluntary self-selected sampling. So this is where individuals volunteer to be part of the sample. So it's all up to them whether or not they participate in the survey. And really this is what's used in the most part out there in the real world. Everything is voluntary for us. We won't be forced to participate in some sort of survey. This especially is where email surveys. If you get something through email or through a telephone call, this would be in terms of relating this to the pay per month for housing. This would be if we just emailed all of the PCC students and we just got some responses back. It's up to them whether or not they respond. And with that, some popular ones where we can see voluntary sampling is any reviews online, like Amazon reviews, or for going out to a restaurant, you might check out Yelp reviews. And with that, we can start to see the bias that would come through. If you think about going to a restaurant and looking at Yelp to see whether or not you want to go to that restaurant, the reviews you read are usually either very good, very, very positive, best restaurant ever, or very negative, worst restaurant ever, never going back, that kind of thing. So with that, it's very opinionated. And usually when we participate in something, when we're motivated to participate, there's a strong opinion attached to what we offer in terms of our survey result. And that's what voluntary bias is. It's where there's some strong opinion attached. So, if we did that survey to all of the PCs and just use the results that we received back, we'd have this voluntary bias that's sneaking in there because maybe there's something that's motivating students to answer. They want to take part because they think they pay way too much per month, or they are kind of happy with their situation and get to say, yeah, I actually don't pay that much, and share that. But with these voluntary sampling, you often miss the middle ground, the kind of neutral results. So voluntary sampling, commonly used, but definitely has some bias to it. Then there's convenience sampling, where it's a sample made up of the first things you see. So it's made up of the first people or things you survey. So this is also a commonly used one, especially if I gave a project to my students and say, okay, go collect some data. Probably the first people you're going to talk to is either your classmates, people that are sitting right next to you, or maybe hop on Facebook, create a survey. But both of those is going to be this kind of survey of the people you know, or people that you have easy access to. And with that, there can be lurking variables. There's something connecting those people that are closest around you, and with that, that can influence the data, and that would be convenience bias. So with convenience bias, we have to be careful because there could be lurking variables, something connecting the people, and then there's this huge lack of randomness. There isn't going to be a lot of diversity of answers, most because they're so closely connected. So we want to be careful of these sampling methods, and that if you're thinking about these, they're probably the ones you come across the most often out there in the real world, but they are not necessarily good sources of accurate data because of the bias that comes through. Some other types of bias that can occur are non-response and response bias. Non-response is when there's a low. So the idea being, if we took a random sample of, say, 1,000 surveys, so we send out 1,000 surveys, this would be, say, if we only got 15 back. Oops, 1,000, and only got 15 back. This would be suggesting there's something going on with our survey. If we're not getting that many responses, maybe it was confusing, maybe there's something kind of unattractive about the survey, so they didn't want to even look at it. There's something going on that we only got 15 results back, and since there's such a low response, there's probably something connecting those 15 responses, something that motivated them specifically to answer. So with that, there could be a lurking variable coming in with that as well. So we want to make sure we get a good response rate. Even if we don't get all of the responses, we want to be closer than that. Response bias is this kind of tendency to respond untruthfully or misleadingly. So respond untruthfully or misleadingly. This can happen, so like if we made our surveys required, something that can often happen is people will fill it in without even caring really what their responses are. So kind of, what should we say, quick responses. Or they could be misleading in a way that makes them look better. So yeah, something like that. So we want to be careful of non-response and response bias. Response bias can be pretty tricky to detect. Often you kind of want to look at the structure of your survey. Is the wording okay? Is it not leading them a certain way to answer? That's how we can avoid that. So this last page, just want to try out with these few scenarios. What are these types of samples that are being used here? So given some of this information and just figuring out what is our sampling method that's being used here. So PCC creates an alphabetical list of all the students enrolled, and then they select every 100th student. And this is going to be the key to telling us what type of survey we have, because this links to selecting every nth student, and they just happen to choose 100. So this is going to be systematic. So this would be one way that we can get a nice, fairly random sample of students. In part B, PCC selects 50 female faculty, 50 male faculty. So if we think about taking all of the faculty at PCC and then separating it into two groups, it's on female and male, then they're just talking to 50 random people in each group. And this starts looking like our picture for stratified. They separated into subgroups, and then they sampled from each subgroup. So that would be stratified. In part C, PCC sends an email survey to the all-campus list server about food choices on PCC campus. Now with this one, it kind of depends the response rate. Did we get all of the responses back or just some of them? And with this scenario, it's most likely that they only got some responses. Like if you imagine getting this email in your inbox, I imagine some of you might just delete it. So with that, they're not getting all of the answers, and that would make it voluntary sampling, so that those that really want to respond will respond. However, if they sent this out to everyone and got all of the responses, this could be considered a census. Just kind of depends on how many answer it. Then in part D, every student at PCC completes a course evaluation, and the key wording here is that every student does this. So because every student does that, it would be a census. With Portland Water Bureau, selects 10 neighborhoods in Portland and surveys every member in those neighborhoods. So if we think about the neighborhoods of Portland, there are a lot of them. So you can imagine you take all of Portland and separate it into all of its different neighborhoods. And then what they did is with all the different neighborhoods in Portland, they randomly selected 10 of them. So you could choose 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, until we had 10 neighborhoods shaded in. And they talked to every member in that neighborhood. So if they chose this neighborhood, they're talking to everyone that lives in that neighborhood. And this is our cluster sampling, where you break into the subgroups and then randomly talk to some of those groups. But the groups you do choose, you talk to everyone in there. With part F, you're just interviewing the first 10 people you see, and that would be convenience. Those people that are closest to them. So with that would come convenience bias. And then this last one, using the G numbers as identifiers, BCC selects 1,000 students at random to complete the survey. So just out of their population, choosing 1,000 random people, this is our simple random sample. And that will do it for our sampling methods and the possible bias that can come through.